Hi, and welcome to Topic 8 in our General Music Kindergarten through 8th grade PLC. This topic is all about using technology in the general music classroom. This is a topic that is near and dear to me as I got my master's in instructional technology, and the fact that I am trying to go over it in 3 10-minute segments is a huge undertaking because there's a lot to talk about. So we're going to start with the basics, and in this first segment, we're going to be talking about strategies and best practices for incorporating technology in your classroom. When I first started my degree program in instructional technology, I was nervous that the knowledge that I was going to gain was going to become obsolete in no time because technology is constantly changing. But the program itself focused more on best practices than individual technology tools. And these best practices, I feel, will span a lifetime. So while the technology tools may come and go, these ideas on how to implement them are, in my opinion, timeless. So my first recommendation to any teacher starting to use technology in their classroom is just to start small. Start with one thing. Become very familiar with one tool and don't feel like you have to tackle all at once. A lot of this became very clear during the pandemic when teachers were given all these options for how to deliver instruction and how to have students deliver their understanding of that instruction. And all these tools were available, and a lot of teachers in my own building were very overwhelmed by those tools. So I kept telling them, try one tool, use it consistently, become familiar with it, and then when you're ready, then you can start branching out to other things. The best use of technology is for student creativity and assessment. There are a lot of music games out there, and they're really great for entertaining the students and kind of reinforcing skills they already know. But those like drill and kill kind of programs are kind of supplementary. And really, the best use of technology is for having students create their own music or create their own ideas and sharing it. And then you can also use it for assessment in a creative way, where you can have the students creating a melody within the pentatonic scale. So you're giving them the parameters and you're assessing whether they understand it. Taking a quiz on technology is really just a one-to-one replacement of taking a quiz on a piece of paper. And I don't know about you, but I don't do a lot of pen and paper stuff in my classroom. So why would I just convert that to a online quiz? So try to think of how you can use technology in a transformative way that is an addition to what you already have available to you in a classroom instead of a one-to-one replacement of things you might have in your classroom. You also want to keep in mind your time considerations. So this is in terms of within a single class period. You probably don't want students on the technology for the entire class period. You probably want them actively making music in a variety of ways, and then using the technology as, like, again, a supplement. And the other time consideration is longer term, your year-long instruction. If you're trying to do a project, think how many weeks it might take them to do that project online and how much percentage of your instructional calendar you're willing to kind of sacrifice for that online project. You'll always want to consider options and alternatives. So when possible. So you can say you have a choice on how you want to express your creativity. You can use this tool or this tool. And your choice might be you can use this tool online or this tool in the classroom. It doesn't have to be the choice between two technology options. This gives the students kind of more independence and more choice and voice in how they're expressing their thoughts. And it also gives you kind of a backup plan for if there are issues with the technology. So that leads to the next problem of troubleshooting. So I'll give you an example of what this looked like in my classroom. There was a program that I was jazzed to use, pun intended, and I had spent a lot of time setting it up on the teacher side, and I practiced on the teacher side. I signed in as a student on my own computer. Everything was groovy. And then I introduced it to my students, and it all fell apart because on the student computer Wi-Fi, that website was blocked. So troubleshoot, troubleshoot, troubleshoot in any way you can. There are ways to sign in as students. A lot of tools offer fake student sign-ins, so you can see what it looks like on their side, so that you can go through the entire process as a student, so that when it's time for the students to do it, you know what it looks like on their end and you know how to help them. You also want to have backup plans, which kind of goes back to your alternatives in the event that the Wi-Fi is down that day, or that website is blocked that day, or that website is down that day, and your whole plan kind of goes into the garbage. You want to make sure that you have backup plans anytime you're using technology, because we all know it is a fickle, fickle friend. And you can also consider having student helpers. So students who seem to have are kind of with it with the technology, you can have them help each other. A lot of times, this is not just for technology, but for basically any type of instruction. A peer-to-peer helper is a lot of times more helpful for the students who are struggling. And then the gradual release model is a great tool to use specifically with technology, where you demonstrate how to use the tool. Then as a class, you go through it, you ask them, where do I click next? What's the next step? And then hand them the autonomy to do it on their own. So a lot of practice with the tool before you expect the students to do it independently. So another consideration when we are using technology is how to manage it in the classroom. So number one is to monitor your students. Have your classroom set up where everyone's screens are facing the same way, and you can kind of stand in one part of the classroom and monitor all their screens at once. Some tools and some devices have locking mechanisms where you can lock them into a specific app or website. A lot of tools have student tracking, where you can see if the student is actually on the tool that you are using, or if they kind of have strayed elsewhere. So, I mean, it seems obvious, but monitoring your students and letting them know that they're being monitored is the number one classroom management tool when we're using technology. Students should also know about digital citizenship and how to be kind and respectful online in any platform. Most platforms have tracking or permissions, where if they're commenting, the teacher has the ability to preview that comment before it goes live. And those that don't, a lot of the time you can go back and track which user posted which thing. And there should be consequences in place, if not in your school-wide environment, then at least in your own classroom. Speaking of school-wide environment, almost every school should have an acceptable use policy and school policies on devices. If not, I would work with your school to create one, or create one that is very clear and concise for your own classroom purposes. Going along with troubleshooting and having backup plans, you can also assign non-digital alternative assignments for students who are just struggling too much with staying on task on the technology. A real world example is in my classroom this year. I had a student who was abusing technology in his homeroom, and the teacher informed me of this ahead of time and said he's not allowed to use his device for the next 2 weeks. And so can you create an alternative assignment for him? And so I created kind of like a one-to-one replacement of that assignment on paper. It was still a student creative kind of thing, but then once he got his privileges back, he was able to apply it back online. You also want to develop routines and procedures in your classroom. I have hands-free look at me, and they will put their hands off of their computer or device and look at me so I can give them instructions. Also, if I am in a part of the classroom where I can't see everyone's screens at the same time, I'll do screen check. I'll shout out screen check, and they all have to hold their computers and turn their screens to me so I can monitor where they are in the moment. So those are just kind of like procedures we've implemented in my own classroom. And then physical space management. If you have cords, are they toward the wall and not in a place where they can trip? Do you have storage for where you can place the computers for when they're not being used in the class period? Do you have your own cords that students can plug in if their batteries are running low? Do you have protocols for if you are doing a movement activity with the devices still out where they are not going to trample on the devices? Things like that. Okay, ideas for limited devices. If you only have a couple devices and it's not a one-to-one device setting in your classroom. One is to do group work and collaboration where more than one student is using the same device. Maybe you have an assigned note taker who's doing the typing, but they're all working together to collaborate on a creative idea. You can do a station rotation where they're doing something with instruments in one station and something with tactile, rhythm manipulatives in another station, and then your devices are another station. So you can kind of split it up of who is using the technology at what time. They also have headphone splitters available where you can have more than one student listening to the same device at the same time. I have a class set of 12 headphone splitters with 4 spokes each, so it's plenty for my large classes. And you can also borrow for your classroom supply. So I do this a lot. In my school, we have one-to-one devices for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but not for K1-2. And then in K1-2, they have grade level iPad carts. But when they're coming to my classroom, it's the teacher's planning time. So they're not using the iPad cart during that time. So I'll just shoot an email to my 1st grade teachers ahead of time and say, hey, would you mind if I use those iPads during music this week? And then the students have devices. So think of creative ways where you can get other devices during your class time. Okay, and then other ideas for just having technology in your classroom. I mentioned this a few minutes ago, charging stations. So I have one of those multi-plug-in extension cords. It's kind of like a tower with like 8 plugs. And I encourage my students to bring their own computer plugs to music in the event that they need to plug in. But I've also purchased a couple of backup plugs, and they actually sell plugs with interchangeable mounts where, some devices have a round plug and some have a USB shaped plug. So the top is interchangeable depending on what they need for their device. Think about any auxiliary equipment you need. So I have an HDMI hookup for my computer, but then I also have an HDMI to lightning cable dongle so that I can hook up my iPad. If I'm showing them an app on the iPad instead, I can hook that up to my projector. And then adaptive technology is really a powerful tool to help not only our students with special needs, but really all students. It's that universal design of learning where they can all use these tools that are really, really helpful. So some examples are text-to-speech, where the computer or the device will read the text out loud for the students to hear, and then the reverse, the speech to text, where instead of having to type, students can speak what they would like and it types it for them. And then another really cool one is live captioning. And I use this a lot with my ESOL students, where I'll have my PowerPoint and my computer is actually listening to what I'm saying and is projecting live closed captions of my words. So that's a really, really cool feature that helps a lot of students. So this has been getting started and best strategies with technology. The next couple of segments will go into student uses of technology and then teacher uses of technology.